Harassment Working Group has on our legislative priority agenda. We'll have time for questions and answers after some of the speakers talk. For questions, since we're using Zoom, you got to use that little raise your hand feature in the corner, and then we'll unmute you and kind of go from there. There's also the chat going on too. Just as a brief overview, we have 6 of the bills. A8847 and in the Senate at 6828. That's going to be the state and public employers as employers subject to the provisions of the New York State Human Rights Law. We also have the legislative and judicial staff protected from retaliation and disciplinary action under the Civil Service Whistleblower Law. A849B and S738, preventing sexual harassment discrimination settlement agreements from including provisions that force victims to pay specified amounts in damages upon their violation of a non-disclosure agreement. We also have A233 and S849, extending the statute of limitations for harassment lawsuits to 6 years. A993, S819, which would ban the no rehire clause in the workplace settlement. And additionally, we have one more bill that requires people registered as lobbyists with New York State to take an annual online sexual harassment training. We're going to email this legislative agenda out, and also it'll be posted on our website at harassmentfreealbany.com. Just to get started, I want to introduce, I guess, our first speaker today, Senator Gennardis, who has 3 bills on our agenda. Senator.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe and warm with this this monster of a storm that we have hitting us here. I really want to thank the Sexual Harassment Working Group, all of the members who have worked tirelessly to help advance this agenda and work with us in the legislature to really figure out where all these loopholes are and make sure that we close them once and for all, because as we have seen time and time again, the corrupting influence of power oftentimes allows those who commit really terrible or do terrible things to get off without any accountability and without any justice. And we've seen that happen over and over again. I think this package is, really strong in trying to crack down on a lot of that. Some of the bills that I'm carrying, before I begin, I want to just give a shout out to my Chief of Staff, Tori, who has helped me really work on this issue and really dive in and really understand this in a very, very deep and meaningful way. So thank you, Tori. I know you're here listening in as well. So 3 of the bills that I'm carrying. Number 1, S6828, which basically says that all state employees are state employees. There was a number of cases, and some that were popularized by the New York Times in a story, I guess 2 years ago now, about the state saying that some of its employees, people that it pays and sends paychecks to and pays into their benefits and pays into their pensions, when it comes to issues of sexual harassment in the workplace, are no longer their employees. That is like the most egregious form of gaslighting that you could possibly come up with, in a Machiavellian power struggle way. It doesn't make any sense why someone who works for an elected official should not be considered an employee of the state or local government that elected official represents or is part of. And so this bill would close that loophole and ensure that anyone who works in government is protected by the state's sexual harassment laws, regardless of what agency they work for, what department they work for, who their boss is, whether they're elected or non-elected. And this would, I think, have a really meaningful impact on cracking down on some of the more egregious abuses of power that we've seen so far here in New York. Another bill that I'm carrying, S849, would extend the statute of limitations for harassment to 6 years. I carried that with Assembly Member Linda Rosenthal, who I know has joined us here. And that one's pretty straightforward. It wants to make sure, we all know, oftentimes people who face harassment or who are, subject to really inappropriate workplace discrimination are not always able to come forward right away. For a number of reasons. And so by extending the statute of limitations, we are making sure that we are giving people the time and the space they need in order to hold their abusers accountable without putting any undue pressures of the clock on them. And the last bill that I carry is S7819, which would basically ban no rehire clauses. Think about the world we live in today. How many, in the last year alone, Amazon hired, what, 1.5 million more people, over the last year. Imagine mega companies, you want to go work and advance your career somewhere, and you're told that you can no longer work for an entity because you have had a previous case against someone that they employed who harassed you. Now, that might be fine and well if you're talking about a two-person office and you're not going to want to work for someone, who has had a pattern of harassing you or abusing you or discriminating against you. But in an era where we have companies that span the globe and that had tens of millions of employees or hundreds of thousands of employees, and you want to pick up and you want to move somewhere else or take on a new opportunity, there are clauses in effect that ban people from applying for jobs and hired places. It absolutely makes no sense. It's a limit on people's economic mobility. It's a limit on people's economic freedom. And there's really no place for it in our workplace today. So that bill that I carry with someone Catalina Cruz would ban those do not darken my doorstep clauses and no rehire clauses. And, I think is a very necessary measure to make sure that we are making New York State a state that's welcoming to all, and that one that recognizes that harassment in any form will not be tolerated, and nor will we allow you to enact policies or hide behind rules that allow you to protect and perpetuate harassment.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you speaking there. We also have Senator Liu, who's going to speak on two of the bills that he's sponsoring as well.
Hi there. Hold on. Well, Senator Gennard is always complete, and he's always the first one in the meeting and the last one to leave. I'm not going to go over every detail of the two bills that I'm proud to carry, because the working group has already very well bullet pointed all of the items in the legislative agenda, which I think we all have copies to. So let me first say that I support every one of these bills, and I would carry all of them. But I don't want to fight with Alessandra. I don't want to fight with Andrew over who carries it, just as long as somebody carries it. And the two bills that I'm proud to carry with Assemblymember Cruz, one, I will just say that, it really, one fixes a shocking last minute change that I saw 2 years ago when we first started working on this set of bills that the Sexual Harassment Working Group has been putting together. The last minute carve out or exclusion of people who work for judges and legislators. Somehow they were not, they were exempt from, or legislators and judges were exempt from those rules that we passed 2 years ago. So this just simply fixes something that never should have been broken in the first place. And the other bill being that, we all come in contact with lobbyists, and I have a very strong standard for which lobbyists we work with, and I think it should apply to all legislators, all legislative offices. So our employees, the people on our team, they come in contact regularly with lobbyists, and they should be free from any kind of sexual harassment as well. We want to make sure that the lobbyists that we do business with or that we have contact with are subject to these rules also. So it's not, it's not rocket science. This is pretty, in my opinion, pretty common sense. And I'm proud to push for these two bills along with Catalina Cruz, as well as to push for all the other bills that are on this year's legislative agenda. Thank you. And thanks to the working group for all of your efforts. And thanks to my Chief of Staff, Lisa Dell'Aquila, who you all know and love much better than you do me.
Thank you, Senator, for those words. Now, Senator Biaggi, don't worry, the orb in the background's not bothering us, but if you'd like to speak a few words on your bills as well.
Sure, absolutely. It actually turned off. It's a hydroponic farm, so it has been on for 14 hours. Anyway, I am really pumped to be here with everybody today, because one of the things that I want to make abundantly clear to my fellow legislators, to legislative leaders, to executive leaders, to agency heads, commissioners at all levels of government is that our work when it comes to dealing with sexual harassment, assault, violence against women, discrimination in the workplace is only just getting started. 2019 was the beginning of this work, and this is the continuation of it. Obviously, we were slowed down last year because of COVID-19, but we are picking up the ball and we are carrying it down the field, and nothing is going to stop us. And I think that the rhetoric that we've done so much already, didn't we do this, is not going to be bought as a bill of goods by any person who takes seriously sexual harassment and discrimination in the workplace. So I want to just begin there. I am always really grateful to join all of you because you are all so clear about what your priorities are and how to get these things done. Fundamentally changing the culture and the laws that have silenced survivors and have really let perpetrators off the hook for years is something that we know is not going to happen overnight. That's why we continue this work. And all of the legislative priorities of the Sexual Harassment Working Group is going to keep New York moving in the right direction, and also going to make sure that New York State is a continual leader and fighter against sexual harassment, violence, and discrimination in the workplace. I am incredibly proud to sponsor S738 with Assemblymember Rosick. This will build on a lot of the protections that we passed into law last year by ensuring that survivors are not financially liable about speaking out about their experience. The bill protects survivors who do choose to sign NDAs or non-disclosure agreements from having to pay liquidated damages if they are found to have later spoken about their experience. This step is crucial, and it's crucial because it will protect survivors who choose to enter into settlement agreements and remove any financial punishments for survivors who decide to speak their truth. So again, I want to end on the note that I'm excited to be in this fight with all of you because the work has only just begun, and any rhetoric that this work has already been completed and we already addressed this is going to be completely refuted and rejected by not only every single person here, but I know a majority of people who are serving in the legislature, because this is an issue that will take us a while to deal with, because it's been decades that this abuse has been pervasive throughout the halls of Albany and throughout many workplaces across the state of New York. And so we will not stop at anything, and I'm excited to get this over the finish line. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We definitely appreciate your words and your passion for working on this law. I guess we'll move on to some of the assembly members that are here today. I just wanted to move on to Assembly Member Cruz. I see over there in my corner of the screen. If you'd like to speak on some of the bills that you're working on.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to the working group for not giving up. You know, I think it's been a long road. We've had some wins, we've had some setbacks, but I think what we all understand, and I think what you all understood, is that this wasn't going to be an easy fight, and that there were going to be many moving pieces to help us really address what was happening. What was happening was pervasive sexual harassment that was permitted and promoted through and within government. And we began this path by making changes about what we as elected officials were required to do and what private employers were required to do. But if we really want to eradicate this this horrible situation and really create a safe working environment for ourselves and for our teams and just for everyone, you know, throughout government and in the private sector, there's much more that needs to be done. I'm proud to be carrying 3 of the bills that the group is going to be making a priority that I think really go to what it takes to tackle this issue. You need the education, you need to protect those who decide to come forward, and you need some sort of punitive resolution when someone actually breaks the trust that is placed in them. When you have whether it's a coworker relationship, whether you're the boss, there is a certain level of trust, and when you break that, you need to pay the price, so that we can protect other workers and so that they know that they can come forward. And so ensuring that lobbyists are taking a yearly education on what constitutes sexual harassment isn't much to ask for the privilege of coming before an elected official on their team and actually asking for whatever it is that they're asking. I'm made to take that training. My team is made to take that training. They should be made to take that training if they want to keep lobbying us for whoever their client is. And the other two, I'm just going to leave it because Andrew made a really good walk through what the bill does. But the idea that if I come forward, and whether it's in the judicial, which is the bill that I'm carrying with John, or whether it's in government or anywhere else, which is the bill that I'm carrying with Andrew, you should be able to come forward, and you should not have that held against you. And because otherwise, what are we doing? We're encouraging people and telling them we're going to believe them, but when they do, they have to pay a price. No, those who committed whatever transgression it was, they're the ones who should be paying the price. So we're committed to passing this, because if we want real clean government and we want real accountability, this has to happen. I'm confident that as we get more and more of our colleagues, actually, I think in both sides of the aisle, that truly understand what it takes to clean up Albany, what it takes to make sure that people feel safe in the workplace, which should be what's happening every day, we're going to get this passed, and when it's going to become law. And again, my love and my gratitude goes to the working group, because creating something so powerful out of something so painful takes a lot of courage and a lot of work.
Thank you for those words. We definitely know that accountability in Albany has always been one of our goals and our missions. I think from what I see here, I believe Assemblymember Rosenthal, I see you there, and I know you have a bill you're sponsoring. I'd like you to speak on that.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you. I'm Assemblymember Linda B. Rosenthal. I represent the Upper West Side and parts of Hell's Kitchen. You know, a member who retired recently is posting photos on Facebook of all his years throughout Albany. And they were many years. And what struck me the most is there's probably no women in any of the photos except more recently. Like 50 men, 50 white men, sitting in a room deciding everything. So that has changed and evolved, and more women have been coming to Albany. But the boys club didn't change. You know, they kept with their harassment, their jokes about women, their treatment of women as second-class citizens, because that is the show they ran in this government and probably governments throughout the country. But as we have amassed more power, we've come to realize we're not second-class citizens, and we do not deserve to have this harassment. Luckily, the Sexual Harassment Working Group is indefatigable, I said it wrong, but is committed to ensuring that no current or future legislator has to put up with that stuff. You know, I was the assembly sponsor of the Child Victims Act, which extended statutes of limitation on sexual abuse. And I met with so many survivors who it took years to come forward. And it was only because we passed a look-back period that they had the opportunity to go seek justice in the courts. I see the same dynamic here. First of all, you have to realize you're being harassed. It's not business as usual, even though that's the standard in many offices. Secondly, you have to deal with the shame you feel. You have to deal with, well, maybe it's my fault, as many women do. And then you have to get up the nerve to say, okay, I'm going to fight this, and set about trying to do that. We've only given people 3 years to get all of that done, and that is certainly not enough. So the bill I have with Senator Gennardis, A233, extends that statute another 3 years, so it's 6 years. That may not be enough, but we'll see. But combined with the rest of the package, it's a powerful statement that we're done. We're just done. We're not going to put up with this harassment anymore. We're not going to put up with no disclosure. We're not going to put up with being the subject of people who are more powerful. Power needs to be shared, and women are at the table right now. We just need a few more protections. And so that's why I'm excited to be here among all of you champions, making sure we really enter the 21st century, and it's about time. Thank you.
Thank you. It's much appreciated. Everybody who's senators and assembly members, everybody who's working on these bills, who's here today, we again really want to thank you for all of your work that you've done to help get these bills passed and to help change some of the sexual harassment laws in New York State. It's much appreciated, the hard work. It's going to help not just us, but everybody in this state. Some of our members wanted to just talk about some of the bills. And I guess give you a little bit more of the background. I think Rita will take us on the first one here.
That's right. Thank you, Elias. I'll start with thanking Senator Gennardis for doing such a good job summarizing the bill. I, just have a few things to add. You just did a fantastic job. You summarized exactly what we want to do. But we've been calling this bill we're going to fix the license to harass. And we're going to do that by codifying that the state of New York is an employer of any employee of electeds. And when we say that there's a license to harass, we're talking about the fact that in a legal sense, there is somewhat of a license for elected officials to harass their staff. And we say that because horrifically, there are many court cases where there's been a legislative staff member who has sued for sexual harassment. And unfortunately, as we all know, this has often been the New York State Assembly. And as some of us personally know, this has been the New York State Assembly, have argued that the worker is not an employee or that the entity is not an employer, to the same result. And that result is that the case gets dismissed, the employer gets nothing for their harm. And so that works sometimes, that argument works, unfortunately, and it did work a few years ago to boot a case from a staffer, a former assembly member, Gabrajak. And that is because there is a ugly carve out in the federal law that says basically certain staff of electeds do not get Title VII protections against discrimination and harassment. And that is just so grotesque. What is being said with that law, we're saying with this law that it is a perk of your official position to harass and abuse your staff, and we can't allow that. And so a related problem that you see is when the alleged harasser says they're not accountable, and then the entity says they're not accountable. They're pointing all in opposite directions, leaving no accountability, and the harassed employee is left with no recourse, often no safe job, and a lot of trauma and a lot of bills from therapy and other things. So this bill fixes that at the New York State level. And what it says, if the federal government is not going to protect you, if the federal laws won't protect you, the New York State laws will. And for any elected staff that are listening, I do want to just mention there are favorable New York State cases, and this bill codifies that. So this is making it crystal clear who the employer is. And I want to thank the sponsor, Senator Gennardis, and Assemblymember New, because I know this is a very tough bill to carry. You're putting potentially a target on your colleagues, and that takes a lot of courage, and it's not easy. So my final thought on this bill is just asking us all to just zoom out for a second and picture what happens here when the status quo, what I call the pro-abuser status quo, is allowed by Senator Liu, when the pro-abuser status quo is allowed to stay, and that is there's no continuity of responsibility for staff. And when there's no continuity, we know what's going to happen. The harasser will continue to harass, and then new harassers harass in many of the same patterns, because a lot of them seem to have this, what we call a harasser's playbook. So something else the Sexual Harassment Working Group has said is it's kind of like the movie Groundhog's Day. It's over and over and over, but we're here to end that. We're here today to end this license to harass and to protect the staff of our electeds. Thank you. That's all I've got on this bill.
Thanks, Rita. I guess I'll talk real quick on the what we call the Civil Service Whistleblower Bill. It's the A09904 and Senate S7841. Just to put it kind of plainly, we were discussing this yesterday. It's very bizarre that staff of elected officials and the judicial staff wouldn't be able to be provided whistleblower protections. I mean, that pretty much screams the reason we made this is that we want to just cover up the shady things that we might be held accountable for. I mean, that's the only reason that I could think of that bill. I mean, whistleblowers are protected everywhere else except legislative staff and judicial staff. I mean, that's absolutely bizarre. So I think closing this loophole and in discussing with the group, I mean, that's the thing. These are the people that work for the people in government, and you're saying if they were to essentially see something illegal, see something improper, they're not protected from letting other people know. I mean, that's ridiculous. I just can't fathom that you would have a law like this that just carves out the people that could potentially see things that are illegal, see things that are improper. It doesn't just protect against sexual harassment. I mean, we're talking anything shady. If you're going to do sexual harassment around the office, if you're going to participate in things like that, you're probably also doing something incredibly shady too. I mean, you're not limiting it just to sexual harassment. I mean, this could be anything. This could be money laundering. I mean, we're talking about everything here. So this bill, it's incredibly important to protect these staff members who might see something improper and then would pretty much be a whistleblower. You want to protect. These are the people you want to protect. And the state protects those people in every other form except when they work for the judicial branch or their staff of legislators. And I mean, if somebody's doing something, like I said, shady, who works in the legislature, you want to protect the people that work closest with them. So again, I know that we've discussed this. This is a very important bill, and we appreciate Senator Liu and Assemblymember Cruz too for sponsoring this bill. I think Leah has a little bit to talk about the liquidated damages bill.
Thank you, Elias. I'm Leah Aber. I'm one of the co-founders of the working group, and I'm here to talk about the liquidated damages and also the no rehire bill. We, in 2021, really this year, we must do more to repair our non-disclosure laws to protect victims of harassment and discrimination. In 2018, New York State banned NDAs except if a victim prefers one in response to the overwhelming exposure of NDAs being used to shield harassers and muzzle victims. This law, despite its good intentions, continues to fail victims who are subject to inherent power imbalances between the employer and the employee. Many employers negotiating settlements just simply slip in a complainant's preference into the language along with other measures to punish a victim, including liquidated damages and no rehire clauses. In 2012, when I was settling with the then New York State Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver and Assemblymember Vito Lopez, an NDA was presented to both Rita and I in the last few days of our settlement negotiations. It contained a $10,000 liquidated damages clause that banned us from ever working in the assembly again. As a young woman, my first job in government, I was completely traumatized to learn that enforcing my rights meant giving up my ability to work in an entire state branch of government for the rest of my life. A worker should not have to choose between moving on with their life and taking a settlement and being able to work in institutions that they're experienced and qualified for. We pushed back on the assembly ban, and in return, they increased the liquidated damages to $20,000. Every violation of our NDA would have meant that these damages would be enforced in mediation, outside of the court system and outside of the public eye. 8 years later, I still have PTSD by these institutional betrayals that really prevent victims from closure and healing. Our experiences, unfortunately, are not unique, and they continue to happen all too often with victims across industry sectors during settlement negotiations. And if the victims are truly the drivers of their NDAs due to their own privacy concerns, why is this abuse still permitted? We must end employers' ability to use toxic NDAs that continue to traumatize victims of abuse. A victim's right to privacy shouldn't come at the expense of future career choices or their ability to speak about their traumatic experiences if they ever want to.
Thank you, Leah. As most of you can see, I mean, these are not just issues that we're trying to throw out here. Most of the members have experienced this in some way or another. So, you know, when you see the emotion, the raw emotion that people experience and feel here, we're doing this because most of us have experienced it firsthand. And, you know, a lot of this is to protect other people from this same kind of behavior continuing on. I think Erica has a few things to say too about some of the bills or two of the bills that are being sponsored.
Yeah, thank you, Elias. And thank you to the members for joining us here, but also in our continued fight. And thank you to the reporters who are here as well to listen. You know, Leah talked about something that she experienced in 2012. And as she said, she still suffers from PTSD. And as Elias reiterated, there are humans that are behind the bills that we are fighting for. These aren't just changes, technical changes or additions and amendments to laws, no matter how sexy or unsexy they might be in the policy world. There is humanity behind them. And that's why we are here today. It's humanity and it's the lived experiences. And two of these bills specifically for me, you know, are very personal. One of them that Assemblymember Rosenthal is carrying along with Senator Gennardis is extending the statute of limitations. It took me 3 years to realize just how much my harassment was really impacting me. I thought running away was going to be enough, and it wasn't, until I was triggered. And it was really hard. And I was really fortunate to find this amazing group of people, the Sexual Harassment Working Group, to support me through that. But the assembly member was right. It takes a lot of time to process that, to even understand of what you went through, that it's not your fault. I suffered other forms of harassment. I was harassed by other people. And so I did things for so long that it was my fault. There was months that I couldn't look at myself in the mirror because I thought I was doing something wrong. And it did take being triggered to realize that it wasn't me. And people deserve that time to process trauma. Trauma is a human experience, and we need to give ourselves the ability. You cannot codify how long it takes people to process. And so the more time we can give people, the better. And so I think Assemblymember Rosenthal and Senator Gennardis for carrying this statute of limitations extension. And, you know, the other one that Senator Liu and Assemblymember Cruz are carrying about lobbying and holding lobbyists accountable. My harasser is a lobbyist. And, you know, in COVID times, it's a little different, but if it were regular times, he's going to be in those halls of Albany, and he will not be held accountable. And training is one thing, but the more we require them to understand the accountability as lobbyists, as it was said, the privilege that they have to come and sit in front of members and their staff and advocate on behalf of their clients, the better opportunity we have to change the culture of what Albany is, of what workplaces look like, to make sure that we're centering the humanity of staff and centering the humanity of people who are suffering and people who do experience harassment and discrimination. And so you know, these bills, the words, they're on a piece of paper and they have numbers, but it's important to remember that there are humans behind this. And I'm so grateful to work with the amazing humans of the Sexual Harassment Working Group and to have the amazing humans in the Senate and the Assembly who stand with us as sponsors and co-sponsors of these bills. So thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Sometimes I wish I could speak as well as you. Elizabeth's here. She has a few more words to add on one of the other bills too. Elizabeth?
Can you hear me? Great. So thank you to all of the bill sponsors, the Assembly people, the senators, and I know it's not easy to fit in everything you need to. So I wanted to speak a little bit more broadly about the no rehire bill, the Do Not Darken My Door, and I know that Rita had spoken a bit on it, as had the sponsors. And so as someone who has been around too long, is that it's the effect of speaking out on someone's career, both financially, emotionally, psychologically, and all is so long lasting. And this bill takes a slice of that and at least eliminates that slice of that being very corrosive to someone's career, to their entire lives, and really limits what they can do. It was years after dealing with the whole what happened to me, it was at least 15 years, and somebody still called from the former Speaker Silver's office, still called my boss and said, "Oh, do you know who she is?" And so I say that because this bill is so important to at least recognize, to change the culture and to recognize that this is not a small thing, that this is not a small thing, and any way that speaking out limits the career, I want to be to the point where I can say to someone, yeah, report it, speak out, and feel comfortable. And this is a really, really, really important step in doing that. So it's human, as Erica said. There's real humans behind this who have whole lives to live. And so I was glad that we could get this bill in our priorities. Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Definitely appreciate that. Again, all of the members have done an excellent job just working on this tirelessly. The Sexual Harassment Working Group, the Assembly members, senators. I guess now we'll open it up to some questions if anybody has any questions for us. Or for the senators, Assembly members, anybody. All right, well, if there aren't any questions, I guess if anybody has anything else to say, if not, again, we just want to thank everybody for coming here today. I think it's been excellent to run down all of the bills. You can reach out to us at the Sexual Harassment Working Group. Any questions you may have, any comments, we'll be sending out, like I said, the press release, the agenda, and any of us would be willing to answer any questions you may have on it. But again, I want to thank everybody, members of the press, senators, Assembly members, everyone who's been here today. Thank you very much. Definitely appreciate this. Means a lot to our group, and it means a lot to the people of New York State. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.